Bonjour and good morning. Welcome to WASA Distance Education Center and PLAR Geography. So we're into the last class for this week. This is our third class. It's Thursday, October 24th. And again, just a reminder to students that IL courses run from September 3rd to June 13th, 2025. So students can still register for IL courses anytime between those dates, but you have to complete your course on or before June 13th, 2025, or if you are registered for term 3, which is their summer term, then you have to complete your work before August 22nd. Make sure you contact your teacher or your tutor marker for help at 1-800-667-3703. And of course, you will expect, or you can get regular telephone calls, or if you're using social media like Facebook, then you will get a message from your teacher. Students can enter or have their names entered into a draw. So our first end of the term draw will be coming up at the end of term 1A. So if you submit your work or submit work, your name will be entered. If you earn or when you earn your credit, your name will go in there as well. So the more work you submit and the more credits you accumulate, then the more times your name will be in that draw. PLAR students, this is very important message. Receiving the lessons, so for example, if you received lessons for PLAR history, geography, math, English, science, it doesn't mean that you have to complete them. However, you must let us know which culminating you want to challenge so we can send it to you. So I just posted that on Facebook. Some students are receiving the lessons, but that's because we don't know which culminating you want to try. So make sure that you let us know so you can contact Bonnie for the PLAR Math or English and contact me for PLAR History, Geography, or Science. Having said that, if you're still unsure about trying the culminating instead of the key questions, then ask us for a sample test to review the format of the culminating activity. So remember, you have the option of completing an open book culminating activity instead of the key questions. If you have already completed a lesson, for example, in PLAR history there are 3 lessons, so maybe you have completed lesson 1, you can still contact me and say, hey, I think I can do this, I want to challenge the culminating, so I'm not going to do the key questions in the lessons. That's fine, but you have to let me know so I can send it to you. The culminating activity can be emailed to the DEC as well. You do not need supervision in completing the culminating activity. You can take it home to complete. Successful students, so these students are students who are doing the culminating activity or who have completed the culminating activity and receive a 50% and above grade. So if you get 50% and above, that means you passed it. That means you're successful in it. If the culminating activity is not passed, then the key questions in the lessons must be completed and you can retake the culminating activity. So you are permitted several attempts to pass it. Students who already have PLAR packages, let's say you had the one from 2023-24, you can still continue working on your key questions where you left off. That's if you're doing the key questions. Those students who are doing the key questions in the 2024-25, just a reminder that the radio, the Zoom, or IL packages, they're all the same. Students can also request a USB of classes. So if you don't have access to Wi-Fi or internet, you can contact your teacher and ask us to download the classes for you. When you get the USB, you can open the classes, and each class is named by subject. So for example, if it's PLAR English, then it will say PLAR English Lesson 1, Key Questions 1 to 10. When you submit your key questions or your culminating for marking, there are several ways that you can do that. You can scan your work and then send it to us. You can email it, or you can send it through Messenger. When you send it through Messenger, you can take a picture of it or you can scan it. You can also email it to studentwork@nec.on.ca. Make sure you CC it to the teacher that's marking your work. That way we know that you have submitted your key questions or your culminating activity. If you are using Google Docs, you can share your document to the teacher. So for example, you just click where you see the lock button. That will unlock it. And then you will put in the email of the teacher that you are sharing it with. So right now you can see that particular document is locked because the lock icon is there, and it says private to only me. When you click on it, it'll say share, and then you put in your teacher's email address. You could also ask your DEC to scan or fax it for you. If you're around Sioux Lookout, you can drop it off at 74 Front Street. We still have the outdoor mailbox on the side entrance facing the post office. So if you want to drop it off there, you can do that. Just make sure that you put your name on your work. As you can see on the course calendar for PLAR History and Geography, we are into the second last week of classes. Next week will be week 9, which is the last week of classes. Excuse me, and then we'll finish up with the physical geography, and we will also look at the culminating activities. So for term 1B, that'll be in November to January 2025. The PLAR History and Geography will be in IL format only. That means we will not be having classes or Zoom classes for PLAR History and Geography. What we will be having classes for will be PLAR Science and PLAR Math. If you are completing the key questions, continue with the key questions for PLAR History and Geography before you get into the PLAR Math and the PLAR Science. So remember, that's if you have decided to do the key questions instead of the culminating activity. Students doing the key questions, make sure to submit your work as you complete them. If you need any help, make sure that you reach out to your teacher. So here is the mark sheet that you'll receive once your work has been marked. So you can see in lesson 1 for PLAR Geography there are 13 key questions, and then in lesson 2 we have key questions 14 to 31. So there's a total of 18 key questions for lesson 2. From our last class, we completed as far as key question 21. So we still have key questions 22 to 31 to complete. You can use this as your checklist to make sure that you are completing the required key questions. from our last class on Tuesday, we looked at the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve on page 9. We looked at the 3 different types of rocks, igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic on page 11. We looked at mining and the types of mining. And then we finished up with functional regions on page 15. So we said climate, vegetation, and soil regions. These are defined by natural forces. We looked at climate, weather, and now we're finishing up with the types of trees. After that, we will go into ecozones on page 16, and then the different types from page 17 to 22, and then 23 to 30. Okay, so keep these pages in mind. I think we might get as far as the Paris Agreement, so we'll see. Learning goals, I can explain the significance of climate change and its effects on human and the environment. So learning goals are what you will learn or expected to learn in this class. So that's the learning goal that we will focus on for this lesson. Okay, types of trees. So the climatic conditions of a region affect the types of vegetation that can grow there and the soils that develop. In Canada, 2 of the largest vegetation regions are the Coniferous Forest and the Deciduous Forest. Okay, so depending on the climate, it will depend on what types of things you can grow. So if you like gardening or you have been gardening, you will notice the kinds of vegetables and fruits that you can grow in northwestern Ontario. So that might be different for people living in the southern part of Ontario, what kinds of vegetation, whether it's fruits or vegetables, that they can grow. So first is the coniferous forest or trees. So coniferous forests or trees, they are like pine, spruce, and cedar. They have cones and often have needle-like leaves. This is all too familiar around this area. These trees are what's known as evergreens, and that means that they keep their needles all year long. Coniferous trees are known as softwoods. Their seeds actually grow inside the cones. So the needle-like leaves help the trees save moisture during the winter. The wood from the coniferous trees is great for making paper and pulp. Coniferous trees grow well in Canada's cold and moist climate. You can see pictures of it on the right-hand side of the slide there. So these are their characteristics. Okay, they have needle-like leaves, seed that produce cones. They grow well in cold climate. They stay green all year. Okay, that's why they're called evergreen. That's why you see the contrast between the trees or the leaves that change colors compared to the evergreens. Deciduous forest or trees, like maple, oak, walnut, birch, and poplar, they lose their leaves every year. Okay, they lose them every fall. And you might be doing this already. You might be raking up leaves already in your property. So deciduous trees grow in regions with hot summers, short winters, plenty of rain, a long growing season, and fertile soil. Most areas of true deciduous forest, they have been cleared for farming or cities. These trees shed their leaves in winter, and there's a reason they do that, because they do it to conserve moisture. Deciduous trees, unlike coniferous trees, these are hardwoods. Okay, remember the other one, they are considered softwoods. deciduous trees are hardwoods. In the spring, new buds form and the leaves grow back. Okay, next up, what are ecozones? An ecozone is a large area where people and nature interact, and it has its own special ecological features. So if you're following along, turn to page 16. So this is exactly in your book with some additional information from me. These areas are grouped as ecozones because of how things like landforms, soil, plants, climate, water, animals, and humans are all connected. So if one part of the system changes, the rest changes too. So if the landform changes, it will affect all the other parts. Here's an example. If the temperature changes, it will affect how plants grow, which then affects how animals find food. So you can see that everything in an ecozone is linked together. So what we're looking at here with ecozones, we're going to look at the variety of characteristics that they share. So landforms, climates, human activities, wildlife, soils, and vegetation. Regions can share one main feature, like the type of plants or the number of people living there. Sometimes regions have more than one defining feature, so when we combine the natural features, so combine it with human activities in the area, then we create something called an ecozone. So in Canada, we have 15 ecozones on land, which we refer to as terrestrial, and we have 5 in the ocean, which we refer to as marine. So when you hear me say marine, we're talking about the ecozone in the ocean, and when you see terrestrial, that means the ecozones on land. Niagara Falls is an example of an ecozone because it combines the natural beauty of the falls with the human activity of tourism. Niagara Falls is located in the mixed wood plain ecozone. So we have the map here of Canada's ecozones, and descriptions of each one will follow. So remember, 5 are marine. So that's Pacific marine, Arctic archipelago marine, Arctic basin marine, Northwest Atlantic marine, and Atlantic marine. So those are the 5. 15 terrestrial, we have the Arctic Cordillera, the Northern Arctic, the Southern Arctic, and you notice these are color coded. So when you look at the color, you can see where they're located. We have the Taiga Plains, Taiga Shield, Boreal Shield, that's where I am, Atlantic Maritime, Mixedwood Plains, Boreal Plains, Prairies, Taiga Cordillera, Boreal Cordillera, Pacific Maritime, Montane Cordillera, and the last one is Hudson Plains. So there's 15 of those, and then 5 of the marine ecozones. So we won't read them all, but I will go through a couple of these. So if we look at the Arctic Basin Marine, so you can see it says marine, so we know it's in the ocean. This ecozone is found to the west of the Northwest Territories. When people think about the Arctic, this is the region that they are likely thinking of. The Arctic Basin is extremely dry, receiving only 100 to 200 millimeters of precipitation per year. So first, we have already identified the name of the ecozone. So the name of it is the Arctic Basin Marine. And it tells us that this area receives 100 to 200 millimeters of rain per year. Average winter temperatures are a bitterly cold -35, and mean summer temperatures only rise to 5 degrees Celsius. So that gives us the climate. So I'm labeling this because this will be important for your key question 24. Okay, so keep this in mind. For key question 24, I'm labeling the different parts. So its extreme northern position creates winter nights and summer days that are longer than in any other Canadian ecozone. This section of the Arctic Ocean is permanently frozen and rotates slowly around roughly the North Pole in a counterclockwise fashion. The waters here do not mix well because of ice cover and feeble tides. Landform, remember we talked about what kinds of things you will see in this area. Well, it says it's permanently frozen, so that's what the landform is like in the Arctic Basin Marine. Now we need to identify animal life in this area. There is some animal life at the edges of the ice packs, but otherwise everything is under the ocean surface. So here are some of the species found here. It includes the walrus, polar bear, beluga, narwhal, bearded seals, harp seal, harbor seal, ring seal. So you can see lots of different types of seal in the Arctic Basin Marine. Whales, ivory gull, and some migratory birds. For human interference, that means what kinds of human activities we find in this area. Well, there is virtually no land here. So again, that's a landform. There's no land. There is no permanent population. In recent years, aircraft and ice-breaking ships have carried scientists and even tourists into the area. Scientific expeditions have concentrated largely on finding oil and gas reserves along the edges of the ice pack, but the permanent ice offshore poses formidable challenges to petroleum exploration and drilling. So what kinds of activities? Well, it says that they've had tourists. They've also had people here who are looking for oil and gas. And also looking for petroleum exploration and drilling. Okay, so that means those are some of the activities that's in there. Again, it says here there is no permanent population in the area. Looking at the bottom right hand of the screen, you can see where the Arctic Basin is located. The very top there. Okay, it's color coded as green. Now let's look at boreal cordillera. This one is land-based. Okay, so it's terrestrial. Okay, it's not in the ocean. So remember, we have to identify the name of the ecozone, the landforms, climate, animal life, and human interference. So first off, the name of the ecozone, we have already identified it as boreal cordillera. This ecozone, which covers northern British Columbia and southern Yukon, is made up of mountains, valleys, and lowlands. That tells us the landforms. So we'll see mountains, valleys, and lowlands in this area. So next is climate. Winters are long and cold, while summers are short and warm. With the moderating effect of the Pacific Ocean, the mean annual temperature ranges from 1 degree to 5.5 degrees Celsius. So there's your climate. Winters are long and cold, summers are short and warm. Permafrost is widespread in alpine and northern areas, leading to limited vegetation, consisting mainly of shrubs, moss, and lichen. In the valleys and lowlands, forests of white spruce with some pine and aspen trees dominate. Okay, so that's the climate section. Animal life. Typical mammals of this ecozone include moose, mountain goats, Arctic ground squirrels, rock ptarmigans, spruce grouse, red-breasted nuthatches, and boreal chickadees are some of the more characteristic bird species. Finally, human interference or activities. It says here that forestry operations are small and centered around Watson Lake in the Yukon and areas of northeastern British Columbia. The forestry sector is growing and expected to become the major employer and economic contributor for the southeast Yukon. In addition, they have tourism, exploration, and canoeing activities. So these are some of the things that are done in this ecozone. So you can see we answered the name of the ecozone, we identified the landforms, climate, animal life, and human activities. And at the bottom there you can see a picture of the boreal cordillera. You can see the landform. So that area, what we're looking at, you can see the mountain, okay, in the valleys. Okay, let's look at one more. Let's look at Hudson Plains ecozone. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show this to you in dual display so that we can actually complete key question 24. So key question 24 is, let me just find the page for you here so that you can, if you're following along, you can actually complete that question. So turn to page 54. Oops. Let's get rid of the highlighter. So page 54. And the reason I want you to turn to page 54, not 53, because we are looking at Hudson Plains ecozone, and the Hudson Plain ecozone is land-based, okay, so it's terrestrial. Key question 24 says complete a chart, such as the one below, with information about any one of the marine, so any one of the ecozones that's in the ocean, or any 3 of terrestrial or land-based ecozones of Canada. So to make that clearer, you only do 1. So 1 out of the 5 that's in the ocean, and you choose any 3 of the 15 that's land-based. So 1 in the ocean and 3 on land. Then your next task is to name the ecozone. Tell me the landform. So landform can be the type of land in that specific area. It could be mountains, plateaus, valleys. Tell me the climate, the animal life, and what types of human interference or activities are in that ecozone. So the one I'm doing here is the Hudson Plains. So let's name the ecozone first. So you would write Hudson Plains. the landforms for Hudson Plains. If you're looking at Hudson Plains, that will be on page 'Kay, that one is on page 27. So you're looking at page 54 for the key question and page 27 for Hudson Plains ecozone. The first paragraph says Hudson Bay moderates the temperature of lowlands during the summer, but the effect diminishes in the winter when the bay is ice covered. So this one is just referring to the climate. Let's look at the land part. This ecozone in northern Ontario and parts of Manitoba and Quebec is an area of wetlands. So that's your landform. Okay, you don't have to do it in paragraphs. You can just list it. So right now that's all I see on that page. It says that it's an area of wetlands. This fact, combined with the generally cool climate, means that vegetation is somewhat limited. The northern part of the ecozone is largely treeless, though areas farther south are able to support open forest. Wet areas produce sedges, moss, and lichen, while more southern wet locations can also maintain some willow, tamarack, and black spruce. So it's telling us about the different types. So we can write that down. Landforms also has plains, and mountains. So if you go to the link for ecozones, so if you don't want to use your lesson book, but if you go to the link that I have indicated, this actually shows you the different sections already. So in this case, the landform examples for Hudson Plains online shows coast, valleys, mountains, basins, plains, and hills. For climate, it says here that it's cold, dry Arctic air typically lingers over the area throughout the winter. So for climate, we can write cold, dry. Summers are cool and brief. So you get the idea here. You can just underline it. You can even write down the average daily temperature in July, ranges from 12 degrees to 16 degrees, and in January it hovers around -25 to -23. Frost-free periods are shortest, about 70 days on the coast, and longest 80 days along the southern margin. Animal life, you do not have to write every animal that's listed. In this case, 15 are listed, so just instead of naming the different types of geese, Canada geese, lesser snow geese, northern pintail, just write down geese. So you'll find geese in this area. Also caribou, bears, moose, otter. Human interference. So look on page 27. It says tourism, fishing, hunting, and trapping provide the main economic base. So activities here, we have tourism, fishing, hunting. I think the last one, is trapping. So tourism, fishing, hunting, and trapping. So these are the activities that's occurring in this ecozone. So you would do the same thing. So remember, you have to choose 1 ocean and 3 land base. So you can choose whichever you want. So if you look at the boreal shield, that's where I am. So let's do this in this color. So that is the name of the ecozone. So now your second one is boreal shield. Landforms. This ecozone is named after the intersection of the boreal forest and Canadian Shield. It has granite bedrock. It has soaring mountain range, but that was a billion years ago. So all that is left now is rolling hills. So we can write down rolling hills. And then we said it was granite. There's also lakes and wetlands. So you just have to read it over. So millions of lakes, wetlands in these regions. Climate. The climate here says summers have roughly the same average temperature throughout the area, so about 13 degrees. The maritime influence in the east gives it a milder winter. So I'm going to write milder winter. The western edge suffers through average winter temperatures. Precipitation in the west is low, about 400 millimeters a year, but it can be high as 1,600 millimeters a year in some areas of Newfoundland, largely due to its position in the Atlantic. Okay, so you can summarize the climate there. Animal life. Now this one shows, so if you look at boreal shield in your book, still on page 27. Again, you don't have to write every animal that's found in the boreal shield. They have birds, bears, wolves. They also have owls. They have ducks. And then human interference or activity. If you turn to page 27, it says the extensive waterways in the boreal shield were the roads of the fur trade. More recently, some rivers have been altered and degraded by mining, hydroelectric development, and logging practices. So you can see mining has happened here, hydroelectric development, logging. The current population is approximately 3 million. So as you can see, we saw one for the Basin Arctic. It says population was practically none, but here you got 3 million. So we can write human interference. We know it's populated, so lots of activities happening here. In addition, you have mining, logging. You can also include tourism for that area. So that's all you have to do for key question 24. You have to find those you have to find those sections: name of the ecozone, landforms, climate, animal life, and human activities. Okay, next up is the environment. Actually, before we do that, let's I'm going to take this page, which is the key question 24. So in our key questions section from our last class, you were supposed to complete 22A to D. So that's the tailings, weather, climate, and the last one is ecozone. So that one you can complete now. What does it mean? So ecozone, and then write your response. Key question 23, we just completed looking at the two types of trees found in Canada. Two types of forests, deciduous and coniferous. This one tells you to outline 3 characteristics of a forest of deciduous trees. So you simply write 3 things. Off the top of my head, I remember that deciduous trees, they are hardwoods. So you just have to complete 2 more. Okay, so key question 24, where it says complete a chart. So any one of the marine and any 3 of the terrestrial. So if I paste the one that I just copied, so this is what it looks like. So that's one that's completed. So turn to page 30. We're now looking at environment. So there are 4 components of the environment: atmosphere, which means air; hydrosphere is water; lithosphere is the Earth's crust; and biosphere, plants, animals, and people. So our environment includes everything on, in, and around Earth. And as I mentioned, it has 4 parts. So the 4 parts again are the atmosphere, so we're surrounded by air; hydrosphere is water; lithosphere is the Earth's crust; and the biosphere means plants, animals, and people. Humans affect the atmosphere by releasing carbon dioxide. So this happens when we burn fossil fuels for energy or when we drive cars. So this gas traps heat from the sun, making the Earth warmer than normal. So this process is called global warming, and it can have serious effects on the environment. So that's what we're going to look at. On page 30, second paragraph under environment, is the Kyoto Protocol. So what that is a global agreement that sets targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This was way back in 1997. We had countries, including Canada, met in Kyoto, Japan, and they went there to talk about global warming and its effects. Some countries, like the United States, did not agree with the plan to reduce emissions that were outlined in the Kyoto Accord. They felt it would be hard to follow or enforce. So since the United States produces the most greenhouse gases that cause global warming, other countries, especially Japan, said, well, that's difficult to support the agreement if the country that has the highest gas emission does not want to take part in it. So if you look at the map below, so this is the Kyoto Protocol participation. That means who participated it. The green are the ones that signed and ratified it. That means it's official. And then you have red. That means they did not ratify or they did not sign the agreement. It was signed by 160 nations. So again, the goal is to cut greenhouse gas emissions, reinforce regulations to commit to cleaner air. Some agreed, some disagreed. Remember, it was the United States that didn't agree, and because they were the highest one to have gas emissions, a lot of the countries found it hard to join because, you know, the leading one that's emitting the most gas emissions did not want to do it. So if you look at the map, sorry if the percentages here, it says reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2012. USA had the highest. Okay, and Canada is there. I think they match up with Japan. So Japan played an important role in the Kyoto Treaty. For the treaty to become official, it must be approved by countries responsible for 55% of the greenhouse gases produced by industrial nations in 1990. So without the United States, this goal can only be reached if Japan agreed to it. In December 2011, Canada became the first country to leave the Kyoto Protocol. Instead of staying to help find a better solution with other countries, Canada decided to stop being part of the process. Okay, that's in one of your key questions. Here's what the Canadian politician Megan Leslie had to say about it. She said, while the rest of the world is moving forward in the fight against climate change, Canada is falling behind. We are leaving a huge ecological, economic, and social debt to future generations. Okay, so before we go, let's do one of the key questions. Actually, we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so try and complete the key question 22, part E. Then do key question 23 about outlining 3 characteristics of a forest of deciduous trees, and then do key question 24, which means you choose one of the 5 marine ecozones and then choose 3 of the land-based ecozones. Okay, so that's it for today.